I used to think it was kind of cool being called Mr. Anderson. The Matrix Resurrections. The title itself seems pretty self-explanatory, as in the resurrection of Neo. But the film plays with the whole idea of being meta, so it's more of a resurrection of the Matrix franchise as a whole rather than just Neo. Now, I don't know how far they'll get. Lana Wachowski said that she doesn't want to do another sequel or trilogy to this film, but the movie makes some pretty obvious hints that Lana never wanted to make this movie in the first place. So I wouldn't be surprised if this film ultimately got forced into a trilogy. The original Matrix is literally one of my favorite movies of all time. So when this movie starts off at the same scene as the original Matrix, I got really excited. But about a few minutes in, that nostalgia quickly faded. And that opening scene almost felt like a fan-made sequence of the original movie. And for that reason, this movie doesn't even feel like it's part of the same universe of the other Matrix movies. The shots are way too clean, the action is way too lazy, and the story lacks any kind of depth that the original trilogy had. So 20 years after the original trilogy ended, the Matrix gets resurrected. But it's more of a pet cemetery kind of resurrection. The franchise itself is reborn, but it's definitely not the same franchise that we remember. The film as a whole just kind of feels like a studio tried to make a new Matrix movie. The only thing that felt like classic Matrix was Keanu's acting ability, so thank God that hasn't changed since the 90s. The movie first starts out like the original Matrix, where Neo doesn't know that he's Neo. Neo's memory of the story of the original Matrix trilogy is actually used against him, and now he believes that the Matrix is just a video game story that he came up with. And I actually didn't mind how they incorporated the old Matrix story into this new movie. Since the Matrix itself was a reflection of society before AI took over, it makes sense that they would need a new Matrix in order to reflect our current society. And since everyone in our society knows about the movie The Matrix and how meta it is, the movie kind of plays into that idea. But I think the film is a little too self-aware. When the video game designers are trying to come up with new ideas for the Matrix, it felt as though they were all aware of what makes a Matrix story a Matrix story. So when the game developers were having that conversation, I actually felt relieved, because it felt as though the writers of the story were aware of what makes a Matrix movie important and that they would bring that importance to this film. But when one of the developers says the line, "What do people think when you say Matrix? Bullet time. We need a new bullet time." That line itself actually made me worry a little bit, because it felt like it was a little nod to the audience that they weren't going to attempt to bring that same level of philosophy to the film, and they were just going to drown us in exposition and action. The original Matrix had a ton of symbolism and imagery relating to its theme of what is reality. The conversation between Cypher and Agent Smith really showcased the idea of reality and what it means to certain people. There's even a shot in the original Matrix movie of a book called Simulacra and Simulation. That book essentially addresses the idea that we've replaced reality with symbolism. And the shot of that book just adds a layer of philosophical depth to the film, which is just non-existent with this current one. But I could be wrong, because that book expresses the idea of hyperreality, and perhaps Lana accidentally achieved something without even knowing. The film itself doesn't feel like a Matrix movie, but rather it has all the bells and whistles of what a Matrix movie should have. But maybe that was Lana trying to create a hyper-real idea of what the Matrix itself is, where the sensationalized action and long explained exposition was done purposefully over the top. You could even make the argument that Lana's rose-colored glasses of the Matrix actually make them made a film where the film itself is simply a symbolic representation of the Matrix franchise as a whole. If they did that on purpose, make a Matrix movie that just looks like a Matrix movie, then I say they definitely achieved their goal of creating a meta film that goes even beyond meta, which is what this film would need to achieve in order to resurrect the theme of the Matrix. But I'm probably overthinking that. So it's either a genius movie or it's another Hollywood action piece. So given the conversation between the game developers, it seems as though the writers were aware of how iconic that bullet time shot was. But I don't think they were aware of just what made that such an iconic shot. It wasn't just the effect itself, it was the first demonstration of Neo's powers within the context of the story of the Matrix that made it so iconic. So when the film attempts to create a new bullet time shot, it doesn't carry nearly the same weight as in the original Matrix because it doesn't have that emotion behind it. So the thing that really bothered me in this movie though, was the recasting of Morpheus and Agent Smith. Apparently they never even approached Lawrence Fishburne to reprise his role, so it made me wonder what was the point of including Morpheus in this film at all. The entire time that Morpheus was on screen, I kept trying to suspend my disbelief, but his flashy outfits and attitude just really added a different layer to the character, which made it hard to believe that it was actually young Morpheus. The other character that I couldn't accept in this film was Agent Smith. I actually really like the actor that plays him, but I kept comparing his portrayal of Smith to Hugo Weaving's. Weaving's Agent Smith is an iconic character, so it's pretty much impossible to imagine him as anybody else. Apparently, they actually did approach Hugo to reprise his role for this one, but they had a scheduling conflict, which makes me think, why would they even bring him back altogether? The entire point of Neo dying was so that the machines could kill the rogue Agent Smith in exchange for peace with Zion. So I'm not sure why they decided they felt as though they had to bring Agent Smith back when they didn't have Hugo Weaving. Honestly, I hope that this movie turns out to be smarter than it seems, and I really hope that there's some extra layer of depth that I missed on my first watch through, but honestly, the movie just felt flat. The combination of lazy action scenes and over-explained dialogue just really made this movie's pacing drag. I will say though, something that I am happy about with this movie is the fact that Trinity finally gets the recognition that she deserves. Without her, Neo's character would have never been able to achieve the things that he did. When the movie was first announced, I was so excited to finally see this franchise again. But I think the film needed to stop trying to be a Matrix movie and just needed to be a Matrix movie.
Stop trying to hit me and hit me!
If you're a fan of the original trilogy, then I would definitely recommend seeing the film, since it lets you continue the story and allows you to see Keanu as Neo again. But if you're not a fan of the original trilogy, I would say this one is definitely one that you can skip. So on a scale of 1 to 100, I give this movie a 61. Thanks for watching, remember to please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.